The Prince George's County Fire and EMS Department's Active Violence Incident and Rescue Task Force Deployment Operations Training Program. This is part 2 of the series. If you have not completed the initial training program, please exit and complete it before proceeding with this training. At the end of this course, the student will be able to define the term Rescue Task Force, identify the members of a Rescue Task Force, describe the goals of the Rescue Task Force, describe how the Rescue Task Force is deployed, don the ballistic protective equipment, and form and deploy a Rescue Task Force team. Let's take a moment and review some key terms from the initial training program that we need to understand. First one is Rescue Task Force. The Rescue Task Force is a set of teams deployed to provide point-of-wound care to survivors where there is an ongoing ballistic threat, explosive threat, or knife-yielding event. These teams will treat, stabilize, and remove the injured while wearing the ballistic protective equipment in a rapid manner under the protection of law enforcement. The Rescue Task Force is comprised of law enforcement and fire and EMS personnel. So the next series of terms are very important to remember when it comes to understanding the situation at the scene. Clear is a term used by law enforcement. It is the determination that an area or space in which a person could be concealed and or could conceal other threats, for example, an improvised explosive device or an IED, to first responders or the public, does not contain a threat. Safe is a term used to describe a zone or area that is free from danger or attack. This means that an area has been thoroughly checked for all hazards. Secure is a term used by law enforcement to reflect the possession or control of an area, person, or object. It should never be taken to mean that the scene is safe. If you listen to the dispatch channel from Public Safety Communications, they are already using these terms when dispatching calls for service. This flowchart represents just one example of how a unified command structure may be set up during an active violence incident. When we speak of command at an active violence incident, there will be a unified command post. Representatives from different public safety agencies will be co-located there and have very specific roles in this event. For our purposes, the incident commander will be a law enforcement officer. The Fire and EMS Department's commander will be known as the Medical Branch Officer. There will be at least 3 groups coming from the medical branch. We will have staging, operations, and EMS groups. We are already familiar with the concept of staging. You will have both law enforcement and fire EMS units together in staging. There should be a law enforcement representative in charge of staging for all the law enforcement agencies arriving at the staging location. While in staging, the Rescue Task Force teams will be formed. They will remain under the control of the staging group officer until they are deployed by command. When the Rescue Task Force team is deployed, they will be transferred to the Operations Group control. The Operations Group will be tasked with monitoring and coordinating the Rescue Task Force team or teams and coordinating survivor transfer of care to the EMS group. In the National Model of Active Violence Incident or Active Assailant, the ambulance exchange point is the transfer or transition of care of a survivor from the Rescue Task Force or extraction team to the EMS branch for triage, treatment, and transport to a hospital. Ideally, and when possible, there should be a law enforcement representative assigned to and co-located with each of the medical group branches. Let's now go over some best practice situations. Your engine company has been dispatched to a report of an active violence incident. It is recommended that if you are dispatched from quarters, don the ballistic protective equipment before you leave the station. If you are dispatched while you're already on the road, the officer has the option to stop and don the ballistic protective equipment before proceeding to staging. If you have not already done so when your company arrives at staging, don your ballistic protective equipment immediately. Retrieve the EMS TECC backpack from your apparatus and issue the Velcro pouches to the members of the company. Next, be prepared to form a rescue task force with law enforcement officers. Law enforcement will provide up to 4 officers for each of the rescue task force teams that will be established. Law enforcement will escort members of the rescue task force team to the location of the survivors to assess the injured and treat survivors. The law enforcement officer's role is to only provide security for the team while there is a threat. Law enforcement should not assist in the treatment or extraction of any survivors during this time. Once the rescue task force members have been grouped together, the senior law enforcement officer and senior fire and EMS member will need to speak with each other and go over how the team will be deployed and how the team will maneuver in the warm zone. There should be a discussion on how to maneuver around corners and what to expect when entering a room and what commands the officers will give team members. All members of the team should understand the meanings of the different commands the officers will give. The Prince George's County Fire and EMS Department has issued ballistic protective equipment to frontline apparatus. Currently, EMS transport units have 2 ballistic protective equipment carriers, and the frontline fire suppression apparatus have 4 ballistic protective equipment carriers assigned to them. The EMS TECC backpack is located on all EMS transport units and frontline fire suppression apparatus. For more detailed information, please refer to the ballistic protective equipment and the EMS TECC backpack handouts from the resource section of the Target Solutions assignments on active violence incidents. The Rescue Task Force team will be deployed by command. Remember, this is a law enforcement event. Fire and EMS department personnel are there to support them. Our task is to assess and treat the survivors. The incident commander will notify the medical branch to deploy a rescue task force team. The team will be deployed to a specific location or area. This is not a search and rescue team. The team will only go to the known location of survivors as directed by command. Do not deviate from the orders given. If additional survivors are located, notify the operations group officer immediately so that additional teams can be deployed. Law enforcement will create a safety circle around the team. It is important for the team to move together and stay together at all times. The fire and EMS department personnel should stay in a straight line in between the law enforcement officers. The team should move with a sense of purpose, as your goal is to stop the dying by treating the survivors. As the team moves through the warm zone to the dispatch location or area, the officers may issue commands. Be prepared to stop, take cover if told to do so. Follow their directions. Remember, there still may be a threat out there. When your team arrives and your law enforcement officers have secured the location or area, begin treatment of the survivors. Begin by sifting and sorting of the survivors. Walking wounded or non-injured survivors can self-evacuate themselves to the casualty collection point with law enforcement coordination. Survivors that need extraction because of their injuries should be marked with the orange and white stripe tape. Those who are deceased will be marked with the black and white stripe tape. When all the survivors have been treated, notify the operations group officer of the status.
Rescue Task Force 1's operations group. We have completed treatment of the survivors in room 233. We have 1 black, 3 orange, 4 walking wounded. The walking wounded will be moved to the casualty collection point.
Rescue Task Force teams shall be responsible for directing incoming extraction teams to the most critical survivors. Rescue Task Force teams may also transition to the role of managing casualty collection points or assemble into extraction teams if necessary, and only when directed to do so by the operations group officer. So here's a question. When can a team transition from a rescue task force to an extraction team? Remember, the rescue task force team needs to treat as many survivors as they can. Stop the dying. If a survivor needs to be evacuated immediately to the treatment area for more advanced medical treatment, contact the operations group officer, make a request for an extraction team for the survivor. The operations group officer will either deploy an extraction team or make the decision to transition the rescue task force team into an extraction team. Do not split the team. The team must stay together at all times. Each of the ballistic vests has a litter mounted to the back. The EMS TECC backpack also has a litter mounted to the outside of the backpack. These can be used to extract survivors to either casualty collection point or directly to triage. The next part of the training will be practical skill stations. Your group will do the following. Inspect your ballistic protective equipment to ensure that all the equipment is ready to be used. Don and adjust the ballistic protective equipment so that it fits the wearer. Simulate forming a rescue task force team. Have some of the members of the company act as law enforcement and play the roles as such. As part of a rescue task force team, maneuver through the firehouse into a room. Remember to move with a sense of purpose through a protected corridor. Your job is to get there as quickly as possible to save lives. The following are resources for the Active Violence Incident Training Series located on Target Solutions and on the County Network Share Drive under the PGFD AVI RTF Training folder.